Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, publisher of Roofing Contractor, Walls and Ceilings, and Building Enclosure, and welcome to our Legal Insights with Trent Cotney, the CEO of Cotney Attorneys and Consultants. Trent, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Jill. It's great seeing you again.
Always lots to talk about. We say that every week, but you know what? It just is kind of how it is. It's a good thing.
All right.
But Trent, let's just start with this. You recently just made your estimator training program in Spanish, which is so fun. Can you tell us more about that and why do contractors need it?
Sure, absolutely. So it is National Hispanic Month, and one of the things that we're, acutely aware of is that we've got to be able to create offerings in both English and Spanish. More and more contractors, especially subcontractors, sub-labor out there, are looking to hone their skills and figure out how to estimate better. It's an art, right? And what our training does is we've got everything from basic, intermediate, advanced, all the way up to actual certification. So you can get you can become a certified professional roofing estimator, CPRE, and it's all available on shopcotney.com. So any questions, go there.
Oh, it's awesome. So I just saw that you spoke at the National Safety Conference, an expo on OSHA. What happened there? How was the attendance? How was your session? Can you give us some insight? And what did you speak about?
Sure. So for those of you that haven't attended or aren't aware of the National Safety Council, it is the national organization that really deals with safety in all sectors, all industries, right? And the expo that they have every year just happened to be in my backyard in Orlando, which is not too far away. But it is a giant trade show. It is larger than IRE. It is absolutely enormous, and it's almost a week long. They have a variety of conferences, and I was fortunate enough to be selected to speak on OSHA inspections and citations. And we had a large group there, very advanced safety protocols there, as you can imagine. And Jill, get this, so I think the listeners get a kick out of this. So to get into the expo, to actually get in, I had to submit my vaccination card to a third-party app that verified it. I had to fill out a survey the day of saying I didn't have COVID, go through all that. I had to wear a mask full time, and there was a guard checking my information on my app before I could enter the expo. When I got up to speak, I couldn't take my mask off until the second before I started speaking.
Oh my gosh.
And listen to this. Each of the people in the audience were in individual chairs spaced 6 feet apart. And this was a huge room. There were probably 80 people in there. So you can imagine how big that was. But you talk about safety. It was, I could have eaten off the floor there if I wanted to. That's how safe it was. So
wow,
crazy. But you kind of, national safety, you expect that. So it was a great time. Those are great people, and had a lot of great questions. Looking forward to seeing them again next year.
Well, let's just hope there wasn't a COVID outbreak, right?
Right.
Oh my goodness. Well, we've talked a lot about OSHA and the increased enforcement over the past few months, but contractors have been hit with some pretty hefty fine increases. Can you tell us what's going on with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, the maximum amount for fines is almost 135,000, 134 and change. But recently, in the $3.5 trillion infrastructure plan, they suggested increasing those fines to upwards of 700,000. That hasn't passed yet. The infrastructure plan right now is sort of in limbo. If I was a betting man, which I'm not, I think the signs are kind of saying that there's less than a 50% chance of the infrastructure plans actually being passed. And the reason I say that is because there's been a lot of back and forth, right? There's been a lot of signs of inflation. There's been a lot of concerns about tax increases. There hasn't been enough sufficient political support. So what that may mean, the upside for contractors, is that if these plans don't go through, if that $700,000 increase does not happen, that 135 is still bad, but it's nowhere near as bad as 700. These, keep in mind, the maximum amount as it stands now is adjusted every year for inflation. So that is something that we need to be concerned about. If inflation continues to creep up, those maximum fines will also continue to creep up. So very interesting.
Gosh, those are huge.
Yeah, keeping our eye on them.
Yeah, what's the potential, Trent? I mean, that could put companies out of business.
Yeah, it's very difficult, and it puts you behind the 8 ball at the onset. Oftentimes we get, citations from roofing contractors or, walls and ceilings contractors that look really horrible when you get them, and there's 6-figure fines and everything else. Once we start going through it, we figure out what their defenses are. we can help minimize that. Sometimes we zero it depending on what's going on. So the problem is that when you have that much at stake, you have to throw a lot at it, right? You can't, almost nobody can absorb a 6-figure fine easily. So making sure that you pay attention. This is one thing that I want to hit home to our listeners. When you get an OSHA citation, regardless of whether it's federal or state, don't focus necessarily on the money. Okay, you need to focus on the citation itself, because the citation itself, especially if you're a first timer, that can form the basis of a repeat, which means that's when the multiples start clicking in. So a great example, Jill, is let's say you do residential roofing, right? And you get hit with a B13 fall protection violation. You do that every single day of your working existence, right? If for some reason you screw it up again, then you're looking at the repeat, which is that huge potentially that $135,000 number. So don't, if you've never had an OSHA fine before, don't get suckered in by the dollar amount. Focus on the nature of the citation. See if you can get it changed to something else or eliminate it.
Got it. Great advice. Well, one other thing on OSHA that we've talked about, Trent, is the some of the heat standard that you laid out really actually on our last podcast. Is there any update on the heat standards?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I had, being at the National Safety Council, I had an opportunity to talk to a lot of people in the know, and I was asking them, you know, what are they hearing out of DC? What are they concerned about? And a lot of their concerns echo my concerns, which is I'm all for making sure that we have safe work sites and that we are doing our best to prevent heat injury and illness. Every single year, we represent dozens and dozens of contractors that end up with OSHA fines as a result of that. So anything we can do to mitigate that is great. What my concern is I don't want that to be an open invitation to OSHA anytime it's hot outside, right? There has to be some kind of justification, you know, immediate danger, something like that, that would necessitate, you know, signs of impairment, something that would require them to come out. I am concerned about the National Emphasis Program because, again, that gives them some legitimacy, some justification to start coming out to job sites as they please. So I want to make sure that everyone understands that you can participate in the rulemaking process. We will post when there are stakeholder meetings, and I think it's important that your voice is heard, because oftentimes, you know, the construction industry is not heard, and the people that are designing these rules have never lifted a hammer or a shovel in their life. So you know, be vocal, and as we go through the process, we'll make sure to keep you guys informed.
Oh, that'll be great. We'll make sure we put that out there so contractors know where to show up. So I also see contractors are dealing with some sharp increases on warranty costs, and we've been talking about that as well. But what are you hearing from contractors on warranty prices, and can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. So I would say towards the tail end of August, the majority of manufacturers that are out there put out notices that special pricing that was negotiated primarily by tier 1 contractors would no longer be honored. So in the past, they would say, okay, we agree that, you know, this warranty, and they're always higher end warranties. They're your 10-year, your 20 years, your NDLs, those kinds of things, that there are going to be a fixed price or there's going to be a reduced rate for that. Those discounts are now going to be gone. They're being phased out. They're in a period right now where they'll be phased out. And moving forward, all pricing will be the same. So the issue there is that if you bid a project with one price and you can't get it inspected by the time it needs to happen, depending on which manufacturer, different manufacturers have different rules, then you're potentially having to pay more for the same thing that you had at the beginning, right? So the one thing that I want, you know, our listeners to do is to make sure they understand their warranty pricing, that pricing remains in effect, and also include a warranty price increase provision. It's a provision that says that in the event that any warranty goes up after the date you sign the contract, that additional cost the customer agrees to pay for it. Okay, third-party warranties, not your workmanship warranty. In addition to that, we've seen some fuel charge hikes, right? So one of the biggest issues we face now with the materials issue is shipping costs, trucking costs. So some of these contractors have negotiated special prices as it relates to fuel charges. And we're seeing the same exact thing where those discounts are being, you know, taken away. So making sure that you understand the lay of the land, that you're dealing with that contractually. You don't want additional cost added on to a fixed price contract.
Got it. Well, let's shift gears for a minute here, Trent. I mean, it's October, so MetalCon just happened, and we're talking a lot about metal roofing. And we just had a special metal section that just posted on roofingcontractor.com. And metal seems to be growing in both the residential and the commercial sectors. But what are you seeing that's encouraging about the metal market? And, also there's, being that it's a litigious environment for the rest of the industry, what's happening with any lawsuits or warranty claims, speaking of warranties as well, in the whole metal world? Can you give us some insight?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, just we're looking at that MetalCon here in Tampa, so easy trip for me. Got to spend some time over there. I spoke. Lexi Sutton on our consulting side was on a panel, and she did fantastic. So I had an opportunity to talk to a lot of the vendors over there, a lot of the manufacturers, and you're right, metal is increasing, right? Especially here in Florida and other areas prone to hurricanes, because in a lot of circumstances, some of the design specs are pretty high for these metal roofs. So there is a desire to have them in place. One of the things that I got asked a lot of questions about was safety related issues. One of the things that contractors that are getting into metal roofing don't realize that if, for example, you're doing metal panels over purlins, you need to be trained on subpart R, which is a completely different section than roofing, right? It deals with more of the structural steel. So understanding that, if you've got, let's say you got a sheet metal shop in your office, right? In your home office, you've got pinch points and other things like that you need to be concerned about. So warranties are also interesting, because a lot of times if you are doing your own roll forming, you need to make sure that you have got manufacturer's approval from your machine, that it's getting the proper stamps, that it's properly registered, all of that kind of stuff. Keeping everything up to date is absolutely critical. And mill thickness is a big issue, Jill. Especially on residential, we have a lot of oil canning, which I don't know if our listeners know what that is, but if you remember like the old soup cans, there's that ridges along the lines. Well, oil canning is just that. You put on a span of metal roofing and you get those waves, and it doesn't look good aesthetically. Homeowners don't like to pay for that. So, understanding when that happens, it usually happens with lighter gauge metal. It usually happens over longer spans. So to the extent that you can deal with that contractually, I have an oil canning disclaimer I recommend, but I also recommend looking at the scope and upping that mill thickness, because usually the higher gauge metals won't, tend not to oil can as bad. So a lot of different issues, but very exciting. Love MetalCon. It was great time to talk to everybody. So
fabulous. So as consultants, how do you advise contractors in the metal market given challenges on materials and tariffs and training and those types of things?
Yeah. So, if you're just getting into metal, it's a great place to get started, right? And I would start small and work up. Metal roofing, there's a lot of craftsmanship that goes into it. And you have to be able to understand what metal can do, what metal can't do, and how to avoid those problems like oil canning and rust and some other things that kind of pop up. If you're cutting metal on a roof and you got shavings to get up there, those are the shavings that end up getting rust, and everybody thinks your product's rusting. So, what I recommend is make sure that you are trained by someone that actually understands how to put on a metal roof. Okay. Get that training not only from the manufacturer, but also partner up with somebody that is skilled in the industry that can teach you the ropes of that. Because one of the big problems that I see, regardless of whether you're residential or commercial, you may be a fantastic TPO installer. You may know how to knock out shingles like that. You get into metal, it's a little bit different, right? There's some art there that you've got to be able to understand, and having that training before you learn the hard way is well advised.
Very nice. Great. Always great advice, Trent. Well, is there anything else? What's making your phone ring this week? Because we know that that's what you always like to use as your barometers. What are people asking when they call in?
Yeah, so obviously materials issue is still a big issue. Navigating the problems that are there. One of the things I'm excited about, and it kind of ties into the materials issue, is understanding how to really negotiate contracts. And there's a lot of psychology that goes into it. I'm going to be presenting a webinar for NRCA's legal conference here this week on negotiating contracts, and it's going to be a full hour of all my advanced level tips. But let me give you one in particular, and this is one that I kind of learned early on, right? This doesn't necessarily have to do with contract negotiation, but it has to do with psychology, and it all plays into it. So oftentimes, when I am having to ask questions of an opponent, one of the things that I do is I stare at them, right? And I do that because people don't like to they want to fill silence. So if you are silent during a conversation, you don't respond, and you're looking at someone is naturally going to get nervous and continue to respond. Translating it over to contract negotiations, you've got to be able to understand the psychology of who you're dealing with, right? If it is a one-sided negotiation, you have to look how to attack from the flank, because you can't go straight up the middle, right? And I'm going to give techniques and tactics on how to do that. If it's a more neutral negotiation, then you have to know when to say when. And the key thing is you've always got to be able to walk away. That's the one thing that's the hardest for contractors to understand, is no project is worth, getting into trouble in. The difference between gross profit and net profit is the legal terms. That's really it, because if you don't pay attention on the front end, it's always the back end that gets you, and that's what takes away your net profit like that. So really looking forward to that presentation. Going to give you a lot of tips and tricks, a lot of personal war stories. So make sure you tune in for that.
Wow, I love what you just said. Say that again. The difference between net profit and gross profit
is legal. That's
it.
Legal. Yep.
That's so true. Well, Trent, as always, thank you so much for your insight. And tell me again, when are you speaking for NRCA on that?
Right. So I speak twice tomorrow, one on navigating the materials issue, and then also on negotiating contracts. So that's on October 13th, but you can sign up and also get the recorded version. And Perfect. Then throughout the week, there's going to be other great webinars. So.
Oh, sounds great. Well, we'll make sure we post that in the notes. Well, again, Trent, thank you for your time. Thank you for everybody who's listening and watching. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out to Trent at cotneycl.com. And if you need to reach us, it's roofingcontractor.com, wconline.com, or buildingenclosureonline.com. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe. It's all free, whether it's our e-magazine, our e-newsletters. So that way you can always stay up to date on all the great videos and podcasts we're posting with Trent. So please stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to talking to you next time.
Thank you.